In this video, I'm going to be giving you a complete guide to C2 inside of AOPG. Now, this is technically the second part of this series. I've already made a video on a starting guide for the entirety of C1 and everything that you need to get. So if you haven't watched that and you're needing help in C1, go watch that video. But I will be showing, for the most part, what you should have if you followed that guide. So hopefully you find this video helpful. But if you haven't already and you do enjoy this video, please drop a quick like and subscribe. It is free and it does help out the channel. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, here we are in the game. And before we go ahead and get into C2, I want to quickly go over everything that you should roughly have if you're in C1. Now, starting with our hotbar, if you followed my guide, you should have a raid suit, the Sukuna fighting style, the Twilight sword style, which is Yoru V2, and just any fruits. The two I recommended were Gear 5 if you wanted a really fun and super wide range attack, or Dark V2, which is also really, really good. All you need to do for that is get the fruits and then spend 30,000 gems awakening it on Rogue Island. So very, very good. Of course, I have this one on right now because I don't have either one of those fruits, so it's not exact. But now that you probably have access to C2, there is one more thing that I didn't show in that video that you should probably do in C1. And that is if you head over to the island of Dracula's Domain. I'm going to use the teleport game pass to get there, so it's just faster. But on this island, there is two different things you can get, which are both very helpful. The first thing being the vampire fruit, and the second thing being Helsing. Now, you get both of them by running the Hallows Castle raid right there. And you can either need to, in order to get Helsing, you can either get lucky and get it as a drop, or you have to get a bunch of blood bags from killing enemies, which is quite a bit of blood bags. So there is basically a pity, so you can get it eventually by running that. If you have access to C2, you probably are strong enough. I don't know the exact stats needed, but I do recommend doing this at some point. It doesn't give a massive buff. All it really does for you is, I think, a little bit of damage resistance, and then I think movement speed, and you also have health regeneration, which is nice. So good little thing to get if you want to spend the time doing it, but it is not necessary whatsoever. It just is also the only gun in the game that has a buff that is actually decent. And then the vampire fruit is nice to have if you are using other weapons as your main source of combat. It's a very nice fruit to have. I actually have it saved by it being a C1 fruit, because if you get it, it can give you a damage buff to everything. It's the only fruit in the game that gives a damage buff to everything, I'm pretty sure. So it's nice to have. You do also need a vampire spirit, though, if you want to make it. The fruit from the Hallow Castle raid, you can also get it from item chest, which is how I got mine. But that is all that you really need to do in C1 before you go to C2 if you want to. Like I said, it's not necessary. And while I'm here, there is one more thing, and that if you want to grind gems and you're in C2 trying to figure out what you should grind, the best thing I can recommend, just from what I know, is that the Attack Marine HQ rate is the best for gems in C1 and C2. I will show you a really good way to AFK gems, though, in C2. It's also really good for AFK or just grinding stats. Also, if you still don't have a raid suit, this is good to get. If you're fully buffed up, you should look like this somewhat. The curses, Helsing, Hawkeyes, and transformation. There you go. So now we're fully buffed up. We have a lot of buffs going on here. We also look pretty good. So you should look like something like this. If you're doing accessories, the accessories you should be using are all from the gem shop. You have Igneous Helmet, Golem Chestplate, Golden Boots, Stone Gauntlets. Pirate Hunter's Bandana is also good if you want to replace the Igneous Helmet with it, but only if you're using swords as your main combat. And that should be everything you're using at this point. So your bonus stats should look something like this. But yes, okay, let's finally head over to C2, Dawn Island. And that's going to be from talking to the old man here. So let's go to C2. Now, just right off the bat, in C2, if you're wanting accessories, there is, from what I know, nothing in C2 that is worth getting, accessory-wise. There is a bunch of accessories you can get here, like the Spy Cloak, for example. I'm pretty sure that's here. But it's not that good, whatsoever. Because currently, the best item that I'm using is the Royal Cape, which, as you can see, it's a little bit better. So definitely don't need any C2 accessories. So that's off the bat. No new accessories here. Just use stuff from the gem and fruit shop. That's all you gotta do. Now, the second thing, if you want to grind stats, there is... I've only ever grinded stats on one island in this game, and it is definitely the best one in this sea. I don't know how it scales compared to the Marineford raid in C1, but it's still really good. And that is going to be if you scroll all the way down, you have to head over to the Soba Prison Island. And upon getting here, all you really have to do is walk up to the NPC And you can set up a tiny task for this if you want to try to AFK it, which is what I did to get my stats, but you can do it manually. It'll just take a while. But if you go ahead and talk to him, and if you accept the Udon, I think guards are in it. You might have to do prisoners. If you accept the prisoners, then all you gotta do is use your World Cut ability while being fully buffed up. And as you can see, this one did aggro, but I almost killed it with my current attack. So it might take a few attacks for you because I do have much higher stats, because your total stats around this point should be around 7,000 total. Or if you AFK further, then your stats would be a little farther. But do not underestimate this grinding position, because all you gotta do is accept the quest, and then World Cut from the NPC, and you hit more than 10. And as you can see, two hits, and it killed him on my current World Cut. It might take a lot more for you, though. That is where I grinded. Alternatively, if you are using Gear 5, it does have immunity frames. You can't get hit, so it is also very nice to have. Pretty sure Dark V2 also works. I'm not entirely sure, though. But like, this is the best place to grind just pure stats while also grinding gems at the same time too. You can get about like 20,000 overnight, but that's still way less than if you're doing Marineford in C1. And if you are having a bit of difficulty grinding here, you are welcome to just go back and AFK the Ice Island in C1, or just go run the Marineford raid, because it's also really good for stats. As soon as you can, definitely AFK this. This is probably the best place to get stats up. But now that I've shown you where you can get stats, how you can get gems, the accessories you should be having, which really wasn't much more updating, like literally nothing changed, I'm going to show you a bunch of items you can get around this level. The first few items all being at the Flower Kingdom. I am going to be using the suit from C3 to get around, the Vegapunk suit, just make it a little easier. But if you head back here and you have the 3 sword style from C1, you can talk to Mosshead here with 1 billion cash, 2,000 sword stats. Make sure it's specifically the sword stat, not your total stats. And 3 stores equipped. You can buy the true 3 sword style from him, which is the 17th strongest sword in the game. It's a nice thing to get, but that is still weaker than the Twilight sword you should be using right now. But you might like it more, so it's entirely up to you. But it's a nice thing to get if you want to do it. And alternatively, there is one more thing you can do on this island, and that is if you head up here, and if you want to do some early grinding for something in C3, you can go ahead and kill the Beast King. He has a chance to drop you a Fire Dragon key, which can be used to fight the world boss, the Kaido world boss specifically, inside of C3, which is how you can get one of the best accessories in the game. One of the only 2 belt items. So it's a nice thing to get early on. There's about like a 5% chance, I think, for the Fire Dragon key, so it is kind of rare. Also, if you want to scale this boss does apparently have 135 million health, so if you can do it. It's a nice little thing to grind. It's probably the one useful boss to grind in C2. It's nice to get those early, if you can. He also drops the dragon fruit and also his club, which aren't too bad. Now, the next thing we can do is if we head over to the Foyer Island, which is Annie's lobby, there's a few different things we can do in this area. Then the next island we're going to is like right next to it, so I'm counting it together. But if you head on top of the giant gate, you can talk to this trainer right here, and you can learn the 6 styles fighting style for 10 million. Now, it is not better than Sukuna whatsoever, but it is a nice thing to buy because you do need it for the maxed out leopard fruits. If you want to go for that, this is a good thing to buy. It's also not that expensive, really, so you can just go ahead and buy it while you're here. And alternatively, if you head back behind the door, you can find this big old island, and you can go ahead and talk to these NPCs right here, and you can learn Cyborg. The default Cyborg fighting style is actually much better than the 6 styles, but the only way to learn it is if you have the Cyborg race, which is very, very nice to have. If you want to know the best races you can have, the 3 best is the Heavenly Restricted to get the Toji support style, which is very, very good. The Buccaneer race is the best default race in the game for pure stats. And then Cyborg is also really nice to get. It's not better than Buccaneer, but if you get the C3, you could upgrade it to make it better. So a very, very nice thing to get. And this next thing, we're going back to the Flower Kingdom because I almost forgot about it. And the spawn village right next to the spawn NPC, you can talk to Sanji here, and you can learn the true version of his fighting style. You do need 2.8 thousand strength, 2.5 thousand Haki, 2,000 defense, 1 billion cash, and the upgraded version of his fighting style from C1. And he'll give you a bunch of quests you can do. The first one being to kill a bunch of enemies over on the Pirate Paradise Island. The second, I think, is to kill a bunch of enemies on the Flower Kingdom Island. And then for the third quest is head over to that prison island I showed you earlier, the Soba Prison Island. And kill them, and then he'll give you the fighting style. It's a nice one to get, but it's not better than Sukuna. So if you have Sukuna, just keep it. Now, for like the most important thing you do in C2, if you head over to the Ruined Kingdom Island, there's two things you can do here. The first one is get upgraded observation Haki. And the second is to get upgraded armament Haki. Both things you really want to do. Now, I did these when all of my stats were around roughly 4,000 to 5,000 on everything, so it's not too hard to do. Now, these numbers aren't 100% exact because there's no, like, easy guide I could find, even when I was doing it myself, like, a month ago. But roughly around 1,500 Haki stats. You can talk to these guys, and they'll both give them 2 different quests to kill enemies on different islands. I think the first one's on this island. Then you have to go over to Annie's lobby, I think, at one point, and also Pirate Paradise over there somewhere. And you have to do all of their quests until you unlock the V2. And there's also technically a V3, I'm pretty sure, because you can upgrade twice. Now, these are really nice to get because they increase how much damage and health you have, which is why, like, I didn't mention this last video, but if you upgrade it, you can get a lot of health and defense and all that. Like, I have the maxed out version, so as you can see, when I activate armament, I get a ton of health. That's all because of the armament. But these will give you a very nice increase. I also recommend getting Conqueror's Haki around this level too, because you're going to need it for C3, I'm pretty sure, for the final form of Haki. There's more descriptive guides on this, but it's something I highly recommend you doing. I think the second quest is around 2,500 Haki to activate on them, so definitely do that when you can. Now, to talk about this island right here, there is a bunch of different things we can do here. As you can see, there is the Gear 4 dungeon, the Aokiji raid, the Big Mom raid, Wano Maze, and then Challenge raid. Now, there really isn't too much good stuff you can get out of the Wano Maze. You can get the advanced version of the Odin Blades, which I don't have because when I attempted it was broken, but it's actually fixed now. I just haven't done it yet. And the Odin Blades are actually really, really good for the V2, being the 7th strongest sword in the game. So if you want to, you can try to go for that, but it's not necessary. It's better just to have like a buff sword instead. Big Mom Raids basically only drops a sword and a scroll, the Soulfire scroll. So it isn't too worth running. The Aokiji raid gives you, the only good thing about this is you get Gear 5, but there's easier ways to get it, like the Marineford raid. I think all has a chance to drop you Gear 5, but definitely has a chance for Gear 4. You can also just run the Marines raid in C1, which is way easier. And the same thing for the Gear 4 dungeon. It's already in C1, but you can get the same drops from the Marineford raid. Yet again, that's subject to change, but as of right now, you can. And either way, you can just do the Marines raid. And now for the Challenge raid. Now, I didn't talk about this much in the last video on how you can do it. I actually advised against running it in C1, but around this point, you can make it through a decent number of waves. If you're barely making it to C2, then you should make it to like wave 10 before you start losing. But if you're doing pretty good, then in C2 for a while, you can make it up to like wave 40 at most, which is much better. And if you're about to make it to C3, which I'll get to the requirements in a moment, then you can make it to like wave 60, which is nice, according to the guide. If you AFK it with a wide AoE attack, it's pretty good and you get a lot of points. There's videos on AFK it that other people have made. So if you want a guide, try searching. But some good things you can get in there, like the Sun God title, which I use. And there's also a really good accessory, being the Cloud of Awakening. It is the best, one of the best hats in the game for fruit damage. These are also all really, really good, but I'm not going to go through them because they're all super rare and very easy to get. But some of these are actually better than the items you should be using by now. But it's very random, so I'm not going to go over this. You're probably better off just grinding your stats up anyway for C3. But okay, now let's go ahead and talk about C3. Now, if you want to get there, which C2 is essentially just a way to separate C1 and 3 by a bit more grind. But the requirements to get to C3 is you need 25,000 total stats, by a lot more than what you needed when you got here. You need to have defeated 5 Aokiji raids, which I know I just said they're not really worth running, but that's the only real reason to run them. They're not too difficult if you already have 25,000 though. So it's nice to get 5 leopard dungeons from C1, which is pretty decent. They're really easy, especially if you're using Sukuna because of the range. 5 sea beast kills, which is a bit unusual. Basically, you have to spawn in a boat and roughly around, remember correctly, it's roughly around this position between that's the starter island. You can see Annie's lobby, you can see where you get the Haki, and there's the challenge island. roughly around here, if you have a boat that spawned in this area, a sea beast should spawn. I think it's every, let me get the exact time, 20 minutes. So it's not too bad. We have to kill 5 of them, so it'll take a while. And you also need 2 poneglyphs, which there's many different ways to get them. You can get them, of course, from the challenge raid, which isn't too bad, but don't do it this way. It's a bit too rare. You can also find them around C1, but they spawn in every 45 minutes roughly, and they despawn after 25 minutes. And they spawn on these islands in both seas. I'm not going to show all the exact locations, so just fly around and see if you can find them. But you can also get them from the ice island in C1 by trading in tokens. The best way to do it is just by finding them randomly, or if you get lucky. So, but those are the requirements. They're not too difficult, but once you complete those requirements, you can make it to C3, which is where the game really begins, because there's a bunch of stuff we can do there, which I will not get into this video, but we will be heading over to the Multiverse Sea. Now, once you get the Multiverse Sea, there is one thing you should do here. There's a lot of things you should do eventually, but this is the only thing that if you already have Sukuna that you can do, that, yeah, you can do without dying, essentially. And that is getting Gojo's support style. Now, it's very simple. All you gotta do is if you talk to Yuji down here, he'll ask you for a prison realm, which you can get from this boss right here. He has a few million health. Talk to him again after you get the prison, and then you can go ahead and talk to Gojo up here. After talking to Gojo, he'll tell you to go beat his dungeon. Once you beat his dungeon, he'll give you the support style, and then if you can go ahead and learn all the abilities for 10,000 gems each, which you can get a lot of gems the ways I suggested earlier. Then once you unlock all of the abilities, and for this next step, you will need the Sorcerer Race. But if you get the Sorcerer Race, which I highly recommend doing a bit of spinning, there are 500 gems per in the gem shop, not too expensive. But as soon as you get the Sorcerer Race, which I do recommend getting this eventually, especially if you haven't gotten Toji or any of that, which is much better, but it definitely requires C3 stats to do. He'll ask you to defeat the Limitless Gojo dungeon, which then I think that gives you the mode that increases your damage, which does it higher than the raid suits, even the best raid suits. So it's a really good thing to get if you want a good upgrade, but it's not massively necessary. So if you really can't get the sorcerer thing, you can just skip it. Toji is better anyway, but that boss has about 10 billion health as opposed to 10 million. So there is a difference. But yes, that's about all you can really do in C2. It isn't too much more than we have in C1. But like I said earlier, basically the entirety of this game is all in C3. C3 has so much you can do. So if you do want a guide to C3, let me know. I don't think it's entirely necessary though, because most of C3 is just do whatever you want. Because just about everything is about the same level of strength, and it's all really strong items to get. But if you want a guide, let me know. If I don't end up making one, the thing I will say is rush getting a Vegapunk suit. I ended up delaying it, but it's so nice. Otherwise, just grind on the abandoned island. But if you want a very descriptive guide, I could make one going over all the accessories and what you should focus on. But hope you found this video helpful. If I missed anything in C2, which I'm pretty sure I didn't, because yet again, there's not much to really do here, then do let me know down in the comments, or if you have any questions, ask them. I might not answer them, but other people might. But yep, just to go grind on Udon Prison, maybe pick up some cool items, and then you should be good. And definitely get yourself some Haki. Really easy upgrade to do, so it's very worth it.